Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our celebration. With the 82nd episode that launched today,
Wow.
we accomplished our goal of interviewing 70 women over 70. Yay! I started to think about hosting a podcast a few years before we launched, and my goal was to interview 70 women over 70 to gain an understanding of what was ahead for me since I had just turned 70. We also wanted to dispel the myth that women become invisible as they age. It was a germ of an idea, and I was able to bring it to fruition thanks to Catherine Marino, my co founder and co host, and our very talented production assistant and social media coordinator, Christine Cruz. Give them a hand. Yay. Give us a hand. We are something. And so together we turned it into something that is exciting and meaningful for women of all ages in our community. The fact is that the women we interview, they are doing something for us. Their vibrancy, positivity, and activism, in spite of experiencing all different kinds of loss, inspires us and our listeners. From a simple weekly podcast, we now enjoy monthly Zoom gatherings, a regular podcast discussion club, a YouTube series where we interview experts who are advocates for women aging, the Get Real episodes that Catherine and I do, and we are invited to speak to many, many different organizations. So thank you all for being here. We could not have done it without you. Let the celebration begin. And please add your comments to the Facebook group. We are monitoring it.
And welcome, everyone. We're just delighted to be with you today. And we are very excited to have with us two special podcast guests. Our very first podcast interview, it's actually episode number 2 in season 1, Judith DeVries, and our 70th interview with Suzanne Dumbleton, both of whom have ties to the School for New Learning at DePaul University and actually know each other.
Yes.
So let me start with Judith DeVries. She's 76, I believe.
Yes.
And thank you. Director of Learning. She's with the Challenger Gray and Christmas, which is a human resources consulting firm. And she is Director of Learning for Challenger Business and Executive Coaching. So she has 2 major units under her. She continues to work full time. And we'll be hearing more from her in just a moment.
Thank you.
We're on. And then Suzanne Dumbleton is Professor Emerita at DePaul University. She is 78. Suzanne, once she retired as Dean of the School for New Learning, has been continuing to teach and write op-eds, articles. She's a strong advocate for human and women's rights, and so we'll hear more from her as well. So we're going to start with having some commentary from Suzanne and Judith, and then the question that we've asked them to begin with is, why is it important that women over 70 share their stories? And Judith, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think it really is, because no matter what you're doing by yourself and in a vacuum, you really owe the responsibility of getting to be over 70 and still be healthy, well, active, able to influence other people's lives. But it means very little if you don't share it and encourage others. I think that's really our responsibility. And I think with any kind of privilege, that responsibility comes. And we've had just great privilege getting to be this age and be able to all be here together and all doing these things together.
For sure.
Very well.
Yes. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thanks.
I also think that stories are the way people connect, maybe at the deepest level, because we can listen to one another's stories and connect them to our own experience and think about other people that we know through stories. There's been so much progress over the years from the time that we were younger, that the in just in terms of exercise and diet and screenings and medicines, that all of the advantages we have coming into this time. It's, I think the way to change the myths is to incorporate all of the changes that have also taken place. And then also, I think the reason it's telling stories is important, and I love these podcasts. I mean, I just love to listen to them. It was something Gloria Steinem said a while back. She's in the early 80s. I was interviewing her, and she said, and she had also written this in an essay, that the younger people think that the war has been won,
Yeah.
that the fight for women's rights is really something that other past generations did, but it's so fragile. It's also fragile that I think telling these stories and making the most of the stories, letting the more people know about what life is and what it can be, the better.
I think women, certainly on our age groups, can appreciate the power of story and how much it connects us and what it means to us. And I'm just wondering about reaching the younger generation. Just building on what you said, Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
If they think the war is over, how do we share our stories with women in their 50s, 60s? How do we do that? How do you do that?
Judith, you want to?
Well, I think we've had a new opening. I think it's been very difficult. And Catherine, you and I always go back to that awful class where we used to get hot flashes,
Right.
where we had many, many of those young women. But we've seen, and I've seen in the last year or so, an opening on two fronts. One with the social justice and what people are seeing with that now, both young men and with young women. And also what's happened with COVID and the economy and all those things and the uncertainty. We see people single day in my practices and that my folks work with that are never, ever, ever expected to be unemployed. They thought they had, the world by the tail, and that fight had been won, and they found out that it hasn't. And it's only through telling those stories that we're able to get them to face forward and move on. And I think it's always been very important, and it keeps coming back to me more now with seeing these young people, and particularly young women, about bell hooks and teaching to transgress. It's always been so important to me in talking about when we're teaching and people are learning and we're asking them to be vulnerable to us, that we have to be equally vulnerable to them. And I think in our case, that at our age and what we've gotten to experience, that's what we have to tell our story. It's our responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And be truthful about it.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think one of the things that I've learned over time is that failure stories are as valuable as success stories, because they people recognize in them how you go about reacting to failure and how you recover from it, how you rebuild. And it also, I think stories of failure also give people more confidence in the teller.
Yeah.
That they're really willing to listen to the success stories more if they've heard the failure stories.
And often those failure stories can be turned over too, because all of us have been successful for the most part in our lives. We've all had things that turned out differently than we expected them to. And that people's minds go to the negative with that immediately, and it shouldn't, because when you say, tell me about something that didn't turn out the way you expected it to, we've all had things that ended up in the end, after sometimes great pain, turning out much better than we expected them to.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're both raising this, because our podcasts, our weekly podcasts, we have, you included, some very inspiring, powerful women. And sometimes we hear from listeners, well, that woman's life is just so extraordinary that I can almost not relate to it. And yet, if they really listen, every single person talks about some failures, talks about grave disappointments, how they overcame those. As you said, Judith, sometimes a lot of things turn out differently than we might have planned, or coming to a sense of grace and gratitude, and so I think we just encourage people to really listen to everyone's stories, even though they might seem like bigger than most of us.
Even extraordinary women have ordinary lives.
Yes.
Right.
And so everyone is extraordinary in their own right. And not to listen because you think that someone is living such an extraordinary life. I agree with everything that Catherine said, which is that you want to look beyond the story for the life that is ordinary, just like all of ours.
Yeah, I just, in a course I was just teaching, I had Sister Helen Prejean, the author of Dead Man Walking, come to the class, and the students had read 2 of her books, and they'd seen the film, and they'd kind of read the bibliography, and so they were somewhat nervous. And she comes onto the screen and says, "Hey, everybody, how you doing?" And then asks each one of them their name and what do they want to do. And because her argument is that she was an ordinary person who was thrown into a circumstance that she didn't choose, but that she felt that she was kind of called to that, and that she couldn't let down the people who were counting on her. And the next week, every single one of the students said, "She made me feel so comfortable." Mm-hmm. And she had written that she was ordinary, and they said, "She's not really, but she is."
she's real folk. Huh?
She's real folk. She's a real person. And so even though she's had this 40-year commitment of a single activity and lots of successes, she never thinks of herself as other than just folks, real folks, and connects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah. So Judith, I know that you have you've been at with Challenger for about 15 years now.
Yeah, I said I would do it for a year.
Right.
I said I would do it for, told John Challenger I would do it for a year, and every year in October he brings that out, and we started year 16 this year. So
congratulations.
It obviously had been a good choice, and it's been a real opportunity. And a lot of people say to me and to my partner Dave at work, that say, "I can't believe after you've all worked in corporate things all your lives in big corporations that you'd go to work for a small family-owned company." And it does have all those foibles of family-owned companies, but we also have a CEO that truly is a very open door CEO. And we were able to go to him and say, "John, we would like to build this separate business within your business." And then did that with him again 5 years after that. And if we were at a publicly held corporation, or even in often many university settings, you can't do that. You don't have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
be able to do that. And that's what's kept me at it. And Catherine told me early on when I went back to school, and I've used it many times and with clients too, she said, "You have to figure out what it is you can't not do." And there are days that I wonder if I can, but I still do. And we always tell John we'll keep doing it as long as we're having fun. And every once in a while, I'll go to his office door and say, "I don't know how much fun this is." But and then recently have been able to find out too, while we're there, he has been just unbelievably active, both within the community, within our community at work, and nationally with systemic racism discussions and work and social justice. He's chosen that as his legacy piece now. So I really feel privileged.
And is he bringing that to the staff as well as your clients?
Yes, that's where it started. Mm-hmm. That's where it started with the staff, both by department and then by company and things. The last session that we had, there were 300 of us in it.
Wonderful.
And with various breakouts. So.
Well, we're going to continue to hear from Judith and Suzanne as we move through our celebration this morning. But let's turn now to hearing from some of our other guests who we've done pre-recorded, and Gail's going to introduce you.
Yes, and again, Suzanne and Judith, so great to have you here with us. It's really you're our milestone episodes, and we really appreciate your being with us. We're going to talk now. We're going to hear from some women who are part of our monthly podcast discussion club, and this has become a regular feature of ours. That is, what happens is each month we review 3 of our Women Over 70 episodes based on the 8 categories that we have separated them all into. We could actually feature a lot more categories because everyone is so multifaceted. But the 8 categories that we work on are play, expressive arts, help me, ladies, resilience, what else? Not resilience.
Health and wellness,
And
spirituality and healing, social activism.
Right. And so we're excited that we get to do that. And we pick 3 episodes and we then discuss them in depth. And I'm excited for you to hear from a few of our podcast members.
You asked what this podcast or what Women Over 70 has meant to me. And I think the biggest thing for me is faced with a recent retirement and with COVID, that it's just really provided me a wonderful opportunity to connect with women from so many diverse walks of life. And it's provided for me this opportunity just to be connected, to kind of mute some of that alone time, and to mute some of that restrictive living that we've kind of been forced into during COVID. So I can only thank Gail and Catherine for providing this wonderful opportunity for Women Over 70. It's unique and it's really, really needed. So thank you so much.
Women Over 70 podcast, the month and the Zoom of the larger group, and then this smaller group. It's been a gift. Exactly the fact that I'm not able to connect with many because I run an open mic. I did before the COVID, meeting and having conversations and introduced to new ideas. So this has been a godsend, and the way it is structured is just so accessible. I look forward to it. I thank Kristen. I forever lose the link, and I say please, and she links me up again. So well run, beautifully done. I look forward to seeing the next 70 women.
I find the podcast inspirational. It's just, they're fun and enjoyable and make me think about things I could be doing. So it's an inspiration. I think personally, I think we all need fun every day, and we also need inspiration every day. The thing that I really appreciate is how much it's broadened my world. How I wouldn't know any of these people. This is all new, broadening to me. And here I get to just do it through a podcast. And they're so informative. They're so personal, that I really enjoy them. And the third thing is podcasts. All my children listen to podcasts. All podcasts are the thing of the future or the present. And how wonderful that you can just listen to a podcast and there's a new story for 30 minutes. I just find that wonderful. You can use it, you can listen to that podcast at your convenience. You don't have to take notes. You don't have to listen to it when the radio wants to broadcast it. So it's not just the content, it's also the form that you have used. And this is that you're using. And this is what I think is, it's not written and it's not a picture, but it's definitely creative. So thank you.
I love listening to Women Over 70 at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. There is something so lovely about the purple and the pink colors that come up on my screen. And as my friend Linda just said about the pattern of each episode, the introductions and then the disclaimer about, this, we've set it up this way and we're going to stay on a certain few topics. And it's just a great source of expanding friendships. And what I most like is that it seems like it's the space where time doesn't matter quite as much as it does in the hectic life that we still lead even in these times. And so it's a little bit like it was when we were 20 in our first apartments and talking about everything under the sun, just bringing up new topics. And I'm so glad we know about it and keep spreading the word to other people too. So I look forward to more always surprising episodes.
The episodes themselves, one of the things that's great is they provide so many choices. I the linear part of me wanted to start at episode 1 and then go to 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I quickly thought, okay, let's reconsider that approach. There are a lot of different things here. And, when I let go of my own restrictions, that was great, because I do think the choices are just, they're essential for me. But I think the other thing is, whether it's during the pandemic or not, to provide things that make me think, get my brain working, just thought-provoking ideas, discussions, reactions, and it's provided that. And I really appreciate that. That part of Women Over 70, I want to be vital. The body doesn't always correspond, but the brain can respond, thank God, so far. So I think that thought-provoking. And then the last thing for me it's this group more than anything is I feel like I've been provided new friends, something that I really, really appreciate. And the optimistic feeling I have when we're done is also, that's such a gift. So thank you all very much.
The podcast club has given us much, much, much pleasure. And thank you to Carolyn and Joyce and Linda and Shirley, all for participating in the podcast club. Just like book clubs and film groups, the discussion gets very, very provocative. And we learn so much about each other, and we learn so much about the world at large. And by listening to the stories of the other women who are our podcast episodes, we enlarge our world. We learn in ways that we didn't think we would learn. There's room for more. So if you want to join our podcast club, just send an email to info@womenover70.com, and we'll be glad to talk with you about it.
I'm not sure, Gail, if you mentioned Raseel, our storyteller from Vermont.
Not. Thank you so much, Catherine. Yes, of course. Each one of these women has a story to tell in her own right that is exciting and interesting and inspiring. And as I said in the beginning, it's the women, you who we interview, you give us so much joy and inspiration, and you're the reason why we keep doing this. We wouldn't want.
I would just mention also that, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
That they talked about community and reach. We have a wonderful geographical reach: Minnesota, Vermont, Oregon, California. So we, as Gail said, we will continue with the discussion club, and we want to add more states, more regions of the country.
Exactly. And world. You can
Judith,
be anywhere.
Suzanne, the world.
Yes.
Comments? What stood out for you? And
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I loved those responses, right? The connection and the observations. And I was thinking that there's a scholar of leadership for social change, a man named Marshall Gans. And he talks about one of the most important things for social change is to tell stories.
Yes.
And he says that the great stories start with the story of me and then expands to the story of we and then goes to the story of now, so that a person trying to persuade or working to persuade people to engage in a solution will often begin with the story of themselves. So Cesar Chavez would stand up and talk about himself and his own personal story, but then he would say, and this is us, I am us, and then connect everybody, and then say, okay, and now we together have this to do. So I just thought when the women were talking about how they connected to the stories touched them and made them feel linked, that some of that was going on.
yes, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that sense of community, it came out over and over and over. And I think that means so much to all of us. And we've really found that's another lesson that we've learned with the COVID thing too, is what that community and collaboration means that we had just taken so for granted before.
Yes.
And had a chance to do that. It's also been another opportunity, and that all our experiences, I think, earlier in life, if we wait long enough and live long enough, we often can get to see some good things that you didn't know could happen. And a lot of you know I did a lot of hospice work in my lifetime and when I was younger, and always said that it's Americans could talk about religion, sex, and politics easier than we can talk about death. That we could never talk about death. It drives me crazy, all the euphemisms. Suzanne expired. No, she didn't. She's not a library card. But that finally people are beginning to have to look at it and talk about it, think about it, that it's part of life. And sometimes it gets brought to us very quickly and very unexpectedly. So that's, I think, one of the good things, and that we're having to build a different kind of community.
Mm-hmm.
I think Judith connecting that one. Someone said Americans can think about death,
Yes.
but they won't think about aging.
Yes.
So this is
Same. Yeah.
the moment in our 40s that we say, "Oh, I'm going to die,"
Yeah.
but I'm not going to age.
I'm just.
I can remember being on the bus one time a few years ago, and there was an older person that got on, and there were some 20-something Lincoln Park Trixies on my bus also that were there. And the one looked at the other and she said, "Look at how old she is. Like, I'm never going to get that old." And I just laughed.
She said that about you?
No. This was somebody even older than me.
Oh, even older than you.
Yes.
There was a part in this university program that I was at the other day and they were talking about aging and ageism. And so they took young people in their 20s and 30s, and asked them how old is old. But when you think of an old person, how old are they? And the answer was they're in their 40s or 50s,
Yeah.
right? And then they brought to each of those young people an older person, and then they did certain things together that were very physical and intellectual. And then they asked the people, the young people, to say, how old are you? They didn't tell them their age until they went through this exercise. How old are you? And they were in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the young people said, I'm never going to think about an old person the same way again.
Nice.
that now when I say old, I think I mean 90.
But we even do it ourselves. I saw a thing the other day, and what rang true. It said, "Why does everybody my age look so old?" Because we don't,
We don't see ourselves.
No. No, or the other thing, when you look at the mirror and say, when did this old lady move in here?
Right.
Yeah, at the same time, when I look at the generation ahead of us, again, we're standing on so much advantage. My grandmother fell and broke her hip when she was, I think, 63 and spent 25 years in a wheelchair, right? Because she had osteoporosis and that was it. I mean, there wasn't hip replacement. There was, and she remained vital. I mean, we love to go see her.
Yeah.
And she put us through, she read the New York Times cover to cover every day. And so if we went and we hadn't read the papers, we were really out of it from our conversation. But the that kind of the advantages we have now in so many ways, in so many health ways.
You're both making a really good segue into our next piece about advocates for women aging. So thank you very much. We on a monthly basis, we interview women who are experts in a variety of topics that are relevant to women across the adult lifespan. So our advocates are not necessarily 70 or older. Some of them are much younger, but they're all addressing some aspect of aging. And so we have pre-recorded a few of those women, and we're going to listen to them now.
The way older women in our society are seen and treated. And that needs to be addressed. And I know there's a bigger issue of ageism in general, but what I'm carving out to be an advocate for is older women. If I look at my friends who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we are not who we're portrayed to be in the media. We are active and involved, and we're current, and we're contributing, and we aren't doting and dotty and need help. Now, some women, of course, are not in good health. That's always true. But a lot of us are very active, and we need to be portrayed that way. And it's time for us to step out and say, this isn't good enough anymore. We look at who we are. Take us for who we are. Let us be who we are and stop portraying us the way you do, because we have a lot to offer. We have so much wisdom and experience and sensitivity, which the world needs right now. And so that's what I advocate for. I advocate for the full involvement of older women in all spheres of business, government, nonprofit, education, wherever they want to be. That's where they should be making a difference.
Women need to plan ahead for financing a longer life. So I get very concerned when women are not asking questions, especially those women who are in a couple, that they don't anticipate what might be needed for them as they go toward old age and the possibility of aging solo. So as an advocate, what I do is I gently bring up the topic of financing a longer life. And I put in there the fact that there's a possibility of aging solo. And then asking women everywhere, what do they need to do for themselves to advocate for a financial well-being for the rest of their lives?
But I did have something happen this morning that was so strange, considering we were talking about advocacy, is that I decided I want to have a puppy, somebody to cuddle and someone to be with. And I've been emailing some of these places that say they're breeders. And one breeder got back to me and he said, you know, we would love for you to have a puppy, and we certainly have. And I told them how old I was, 80-year-olds that have puppies. But do you have an advocate? And he went on to say, what I mean by that is our puppies live 15 to 20 years. And do you have someone that will take care of the puppy after you're gone?
My goodness.
And I mean, it just sort of plugged into how everybody needs an advocate. The puppies need an advocate, and certainly we need advocates. And we need advocates that are younger than we are.
Mm-hmm.
We need to remember that. We need to know that having an advocate doesn't mean that we're out of sync with the world and that we are not able to do anything for ourselves. It means that we have someone that helps. It means that we're not into denial about how we don't see as well as we get older, or how we don't hear as well, or how maybe we don't eat as well. So it's really important to have an advocate. And I think especially people who are alone and don't have kids here, or have kids that are busy, everybody's busy, we need to have a special person. So do it now. Do it while you still have most of your faculties, so that you know who that person will be.
Yes, good advice. So what about senior living?
Well, I wanted to say that not all of us want or can afford senior living or independent residential living. We want to be at home, so we have to start exploring now. There are many nonprofit organizations in every city who can help, and we need to check them out. And we really need to not wait, because when it's too late, it's in the hands of our kids, and it might not be what we want.
My name is Lydia Manning, and I'm a professor of gerontology at Concordia University, Chicago. And Gail and Catherine have kindly asked me to rejoin the conversation and address pressing issues for women in later life, both now and in the future, and what my thoughts are on that as a gerontologist and as an aging woman myself. I think, you know, in our last discussion, I talked about this and I referenced it, but I think it's still so true. I think ageism is such a problem for not only older adults at large, but particularly for aging women. And I feel like until we can really come together and address the pervasive and ubiquitous issues that are inherent and embedded in ageism and existing and growing older in an ageist culture, we're going to continue to have to fight and claim voice and claim responsibility. And I look to the current political climate, and I think it saddens me that the only real meaningful conversation around age is who's too old to serve as our president. So I think issues for women right around ageism, around claiming visibility, around managing that intersection of age and gender, I think those are important things to always think about. I also think financial security is important and will continue to be important, for both the current cohorts of older women, but also for future generations of older women. If we look at the data, we know that more and more women are choosing to remain single and child-free. And so what will that look like in later life? And so how can you financially prepare to live to 100 as potentially a single income earner? without a built-in social support system of loved ones to take care of you. Although we know not all loved ones and adult children take care of their parents. But again, preparing to be your own advocate as a woman as you age, both for current older women and future older women. Financial security, ageism, and I think too, negotiating living arrangements and space and what it's going to look like or what it's going to take to be able to have the old age of your choice. Do you want to age in place? Do you want to age in community? Can you? Does it make sense for you? If not, what are your other options? So I guess the financial preparedness also goes along with the care preparedness. But how are you gonna meet your needs as you age and celebrate all the while?
It's probably clear what their prompt question was, although I think I failed to say it, and that it was, what are the most unresolved advocacy issues for aging women? And Judith, Suzanne, comments again, what stood out for you in terms of what you heard, and what would you like to add of your own?
I think it's really, really true. And I face in my work every single day talk about ageism and people in transition and those things. And one of the things, and it really is another social piece, another social justice piece, I can't get away from them, is that when the so-called retirement ages were established, many, many, many people died in their 60s. Many had worked on the farms or worked in factories and things, and they died very quickly after that retirement age. Now, if we know someone who dies in their 60s, it's a tragedy. So what do we do, and how do we advocate for those people and for those lives that we're going to have? And looking at it, I suddenly realized at one point, certainly, that both of my grandmothers lived to be over 100. I thought, sister, you've got a long way to go here yet and figure this out. But I think it's an important advocacy thing. And we are finding that there are certainly organizations and groups, and not just not-for-profit, but in business, that have learned a lesson about how important it is for them to purchase wisdom.
Say more about that, Judith, purchase wisdom.
I think it's purchase wisdom because it used to be, and one thing we don't see so much anymore as we did, was the newly minted MBA with little or no business experience coming into the work world with a golden ticket. And it did not work well. And companies don't have the time or the luxury of doing that now. And with the change, also the advantage to them of buying the wisdom of those of us that are older and experienced and skilled is that they do not have to plan for our benefits or taking care of us for 25 or 30 years. That they can look at that. And one thing that's really fueled that are the acquisition of private companies and organizations by private equity firms and virtual capital, because their idea is to come in and change things and leverage them for sale, and doing it, they don't have time to develop people. Therefore, they purchase wisdom, which is a real advantage for skilled, well-educated older people.
That is a very optimistic note.
I have to be.
Right. Yes. Suzanne?
Well, yeah, I was taken by the several times the question of money and the question of financial autonomy was raised. And I think too, there's the intersection with the questions of racism in this country. And so that really the attention to the under-resourced women who are either leaving the workforce or who are who have been underpaid their whole professional life or their whole work life, and then coming in and having to face this longer lifespan. It's a huge crisis. And I had gone, and I told Catherine, I went on this morning, I went on the United Nations page to see what the issues of worldwide were for women aging. And they were the same worldwide. It was finance, safety, safety from violence, safety from being susceptible to criminal activities trying to extract their resources or and then the health, so that these issues are really worldwide. And I was, because the question was really about policies, I thought. So these are things, not just the individual care, but the idea of what the country needs to be doing in terms of making sure that Social Security, for example, is adequate to the task, and that Medicare and Medicaid are adequate to the task, and that they're equitably available to everyone. There were pieces yesterday's papers saying that women are the COVID is pushing more women out of the workforce than men, and that not only are they now outside of being compensated, but they're now out of the promotion ladder. And if it's going to last for more time, and they're going to have to be taking more care of their children, that, the disruption of the progress that has been made may be substantial.
Are you seeing some of that, Judith, in your
Yes,
line
the disruption for women is so much more than it has been for men. It really has, in numbers and in where they can go, what they can do. I would also encourage any of you that have younger women in your family, or that you're working with or talking to, or whatever, that are at the beginning of their career, is to get them a little book called Women Don't Ask. And that at the beginning of our careers, if we realize that women leave in a lifetime well over $1 million on the table because women don't ask. Somebody will give us an offer and we say, "Thank you very much, sir." And a male is going to interview then, and they're going to ask for $50,000 more a year, because there's more of that attitude about, what the hell, I'm going to ask, what's the worst thing that can happen? But we still have that ingrained thing about thank you for considering me, rather than no, this is me. And so that thing about women learning to negotiate and ask is just really, really important.
Yes, I think that hitches on to the idea that some women don't learn about money, that if they're in a partnership and they allow the other partner to be responsible for the finances, that they then can become suddenly vulnerable because they don't know enough.
You're wonderful, you two. You're just wonderful. We so appreciate your being here and giving us a sense of your wisdom and sharing that wisdom with all of our listeners and everyone who is watching this video. You're so inspiring, and every aspect of this work that we're doing is so inspiring to me, and I know it is to Catherine too.
Well, what I really appreciate how we've covered from what sharing the story means to each of us as an individual, and expanding our sense of community and our ideas and our perspectives, and moving through all the way to worldwide issues that we women have in common, and the need to continue to recognize ageism, to combat it, to really think larger about policies and what can we do to influence policy, whether it's in the workplace or the legislative. So that is inspiring me to be thinking even beyond what we're currently doing. I was really struck by also about that sense of community. We talk about that a lot, but what does that mean? And I think what we've heard today is that community is across geography. We've reached pretty much across the United States. It's across time, and we have women of between 70 and 100. That's quite a large spread, and making friends during when you're virtual. That sense that you can actually make friends and together tackle some of these really messy social justice issues. So I'm very, as Gail said, I'm very inspired by it. And Suzanne, I really liked you bringing out Marshall Gans.
Yeah.
That starts with me. The story starts with me, and it becomes a story of we, and then we act. We act now. And as Lydia Manning said, claim our voice, we exercise our voice, we be our own advocates, we advocate for one another. I think it's just fabulous. Suzanne.
Can I just, do we have enough time for me just to, because what I want to do when I was thinking about this, the whole question of race and the racist society in which we've lived for so long, what is apparent now, and we're learning more about, is, for example, when you just talk about the finances, that an African-American woman over 70 has not had the opportunities for wealth creation that her peers from other groups have. And so that much of what we say about safety and money and vulnerability is magnified for people who have suffered from racist culture in which they live.
Yeah.
And so in terms of policy and in terms of advocacy, the focus of much has been on the vulnerability to the police present. But when you think about the vulnerability of women of African descent over the years and the disadvantages they lived under from a policy perspective, the redlining, the inability to be compensated at appropriate levels, and so not to be able to be in as financially secure position as their peers, is really something we should be thinking about and trying to amend.
Yes.
Judith, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think it's exactly right, Suzanne, and I think it's important and an important subject and one to mention. At the beginning of the George Floyd thing, it meant a great deal to me when I heard John Meacham speaking one evening, and he said, I'm going to speak to you as white people now, and as I am too. As white people, we have got to finally come to terms and understand that racism is not the problem of people of color to solve, it's ours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, on that note, Catherine, do you have anything else to say?
No, I said my piece. Thank you.
Ladies, Suzanne, Judith, closing words? Suzanne?
No, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. It's an honor.
Thank you so much, Judith and Suzanne. And also, on that note that we were just talking about, we would really appreciate if you can refer women to us, anybody listening who can speak to these issues of racism and inequities. We would be so appreciative.
Yes.
Deborah Holton is Dr. Deborah Holton is an advocate for aging that will be probably her episode will be coming in probably January, and she speaks very, very eloquently about self-care and radical self-care for women of color. And so she, her episode will kind of, I think, start to prime that conversation, and we have a lot more to discuss about that. So thank you. Thank you.
Good. And on that note, let the champagne.
It didn't pop. So it's unopened, but
cheers to all.
Congratulations to the two of you, the three of you, for having created this really meaningful enterprise.
Thank you to all of you. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. We couldn't do it without you all. Thanks.